Hi, welcome to Podcastina. I am recording this on Friday, January 24th. I just wanted to do an episode to talk about the impact of the fires that happened here, to share some resources for anybody that wants to help. I know a lot of people have been helping already. If you're looking to do more of that, or you're looking for other ways that you can assist, this is just an episode that's going to have some of that available to you. I'm going to post a bunch of different links in the show notes for organizations that are helping people who have lost everything, as well as some resources to point you to ways that you can support firefighters. In this episode, I have an interview with a firefighter, and he answered a lot of pertinent questions for me. He talked about controlling the fires and how it could have gotten so out of hand and why you shouldn't listen to conspiracy theories. It's been a tough couple of weeks here. I really love this city. I really love this city. I'm going to get emotional if I get into it. I've been here 12 years. I do consider it my home. It's been my whole adult life. And being here and experiencing a trauma, really, of this magnitude, it's just been tough to reconcile. It really has. I've felt a lot of emotions. It's been a mix of trauma, fear, guilt at being a person who didn't lose anything, and guilt at feeling all of the negative feelings. Just, I guess, like the collective trauma, right? Like, yeah, those of us who didn't have to evacuate, but were dealing with the alerts, the false alarms that were coming, like that was its own form of trauma, losing sleep. And even as I'm recording this, there are fires still burning. Palisades and Eaton are not at 100% containment just yet, and there's new fires popping up every day. Yesterday we had Sepulveda, we had a fire in Camarillo that is burning, we had Cascaic. I mean, it just feels like open season on Los Angeles right now, and that's been really tough to digest. I will say, on a positive note, it's been incredible to watch people rally around those who have lost everything in this. I had the experience, and many people I'm friends with had the experience, of going out to volunteer sites and being turned away because there was way too many people. And it is just so incredible to see the turnout and the love and the support in the community. And it's the one silver lining of tragedy, is that you do get to see community come together. But the magnitude of this, like, I can tell you, Los Angeles will never be the same. I will never look at people from here the same. And I will try my best to move forward with a couple degrees more kindness and patience and empathy, because there's just so many people who this has impacted. You just never know. Like, even someone who might cut me off on the road or do something annoying in public, I don't know, whatever it is that typically would weigh on my patience, I'm going to do my best to move forward from this with just a little more kindness and compassion for the people in this city, considering what we've just gone through. Yeah, it's been tough to listen to conspiracy theories and see all the negative comments online, and focusing on the good has been the thing that has kind of been able to keep some of that negativity at bay. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you here to Eric. He's going to answer some questions about firefighting. It's super exciting to get to have a conversation with him about this. And yeah, this is Eric. All right, Eric, welcome to Podcastina.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Of
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for talking to me today.
course.
Can you tell me about your background?
So I have a little bit over 10 years in various firefighting. A large bulk of my career was with the U.S. Forest Service, doing more wildland fire based. I worked up initially up in the Truckee area in Northern California on some what's called Type 3 engine, which is basically a wildland engine. And then did that for a little bit, 6 years on a hotshot crew, which is like a Type 1 hand crew. And they get a little more technical, kind of harder to reach remote areas on fires and have a little more like the qualification standards is a little higher. I did that for like 6 years, like I said, up on El Dorado Hot Shots, which is another Northern California crew. And the last about 2.5 years, I've worked in a municipal department doing more of the structure city side up in Northern California Fire Department outside of Sacramento. So I've mostly been Northern California based, but California and like the United States as a whole has a mutual aid system where you help each other and respond to incidents. So on the feds, I've been all over Northern Southern California, as far east as the Dakotas, up to Alaska, and bounced around. Got a lot of experience in that, and then just various volunteer firefighting. That's the bulk of my experience and background in this situation.
Can you tell me what's the difference then between these various departments, like your department, which is wildland fires, versus your counterparts in the city versus CAL FIRE? Because I think a lot of people don't have an understanding of what the different roles are for these departments.
Hmm. Yeah, so even in all three of those departments vary in a lot of ways. I'll start with the Forest Service. They all have different mission statements, which is like the overall goal of each department and what they want to accomplish, and then that trickles down to how they're staffed, how they're run, um, their tactics and strategies, even on fires themselves. And so in the Forest Service, it's a lot of land management. So you're working year round, doing, prescribed burns, thinning of the forests, training, and then on fires themselves, they're still kind of like you'll hear different sides on the media and whatnot, but they're still primarily focused on land management and saving as much trees and just forest, just nature, trying to save the country's land. And which nowadays that also includes us, people, structures, wildland urban interface is when our homes and communities encroaches into the forests. So it's all encompassed in that. And then you have where we're currently in structure municipal fire. We have a lot of focus on life safety is usually the primary goal, and then um, life safety, property, environment. So it's almost flipped in a sense of the priority. And then Cal Fires, they have a like big wildland component to them, but they run similarly to city where life safety, property, land. And I'll vary a little bit on what side of California you're in, just because of this huge state and we have such different ecosystems everywhere. That's kind of the main difference is, the more wildland forest um, guided agencies, their main goal is to control or put out the fires and do what's best for the land and the people. And then the more city side fire departments, they're trying to do what's best for the people right now and then the land. Sometimes what's best for the people is putting the fire out immediately. So it kind of goes back and forth, but it depends on where the fire is and what the situation is. So there's still a lot of variables, but those are like the main differences is it's kind of flipped on their mission statements and goals.
Okay, that makes sense. I've heard some ramblings of complaints, maybe some in LA, maybe some outside of LA. And it's tough for me being here, right, to hear the criticism and not immediately get defensive that it's not coming from a place of empathy, first and foremost. But I do have to raise the question, is there some kind of abatement that either local government or state government could have done to help before these Palisades fires and the Eaton fire broke out?
So that's a hard one because everyone wants to have that like smoking gun or it's just this one singular issue that could have solved all of our problems, right? But it's a bunch of issues that's compounded over the last 100 years. So I mean, yeah, yes, there is the whole a little bit better management, more prescribed burns, um, defensible space, But at the same time, especially in these current Los Angeles fires, what people keep not like, you have like the chaparral, eucalyptus, manzanitas. Those are all, they grow in a year. So it's, and people forget just how big LA is. And I think a lot of people, like, not trying to be offensive, just don't know. Like, most people think city, flat city, like suburbs, skyscrapers. But LA is very, I call it mountainous, hilly. There's drainages everywhere. Communities are shoveling the hillsides. And you get Santa Ana's, which is a very dry wind, very strong wind. And they were upwards of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, which I've seen a couple fires with like that had that high of wind on it, and you'd be surprised. I've seen um, sheetgrass in Nevada that's 6, 7, 8 inches tall, and when you get 60, 80 mile an hour winds on it, you can get 20-foot flames blowing off it. So also, it's if even if they did all the proper, if they had unlimited budget, unlimited time, perfectly landscaped the mountainside, everything's so close and the winds are so strong, it still probably would have jumped from house to house. There's also, and like a lot of these fixes are just so expensive. Like you could not fireproof every house, but make them more fire resistant. No comp roofs, have metal roofs, build fire resistant coatings on the houses. Have like a hard mandate on the 100-foot defensible space, and that's hard too because there's houses down there that you couldn't get 100. They're not even 100 feet apart, so you couldn't even get that 100-foot spacing. So I think there's just a lot more variables than people realize, especially when they don't know or they haven't been in that situation that often. California's been in a drought for since I started in the fire service, and even when we had good rain years and they'd claim we were out of a drought, you're still basically it's temporary, and we're right back in the drought the next year. So then that everything's dry. We haven't had a wet winter really this year, so it was getting dry. SoCal's a desert. Like it's basically a modern feat that we built such a massive city down here. So there's just so many variables to add on to it. I don't think the main variable being the wind. I don't think that would have changed much, no matter what we prepared for it. Even if they knew, even you go back in time and brought a ton of equipment, all the aircraft, helicopters, engines, maybe it would have been controlled a little or managed a little faster or better, but I don't think so. And then people like to point a lot at like the hydrants running dry. I heard that one a lot. Um, Most cities' water systems aren't designed to have every single hydrant open at the same time, flowing. Most of these fire engines can flow 1,000 to 2,000 gallons per minute. So you have all of them hooked up, pulling water, spraying. No municipal water supply can handle that. A lot of these cities are already like teetering on equilibrium just in general day-to-day water uses. So long story short, there's not really, there's so many variables. Like in a perfect world, and you could hit every single problem, maybe. But ideally, it would be like it'd be so expensive or so wild, like have people not live in certain high risk areas, which is impossible. So not really.
Yeah, it's tough to take that in, but at the same time comforting to know that the city isn't necessarily to blame because I heard that
Mhm.
the Palisades fire at the height of it was moving. At one point I heard 100 yards per minute, another point I heard 300 yards per minute. So there is something oddly comforting about hearing that there's not much they could have done. Just the force of that is extraordinary.
Yeah, and especially. where like think it can burn as fast as the wind's blowing, as long as it's touching fuels. So yeah, you're in an 80-mile-an-hour wind, you can have fire moving at 80 miles an hour. Um, and then also LA is such a big area and has so many different agencies, like fire agencies, fire departments, and they're all in. I'm sure someone in LA City, they have someone's put up a training or drill for probably the exact same scenario that happened with the Palisades fire. Because it's not really a surprise fire. It's like it could happen if everything lines up, and everything lined up this year. But it's different to talk about it and train on it, and then also get 50 different departments on the same page, like getting all these people to react quickly and be on the same page and figure it out and know what's going on. Especially in these early fires, they seem very chaotic because for one, they are chaotic, and a lot of it's the higher ups, like incident commanders, they're trying to gather information to figure out, okay, what's going on, what's burning, what's like how they're trying to break it down to make sense. In the meanwhile, you have everyone on the field trying to put out fires, basically going house to house, like doing the best they can because you can't really capture it all on the grand scale that early. So you're trying to chip away, do the most good that you can, and it's hard. Like, I know there was people critiquing because you get a lot of people that listen to the radio chatters, and a lot of people critiquing like, oh, they didn't know what they're doing. They sounded stressed, and I'm sure they were very stressed. It's like that's not a usual at that grand scale. It's not a usual thing most firefighters face. Maybe a couple times in a career. It's been a little different the last 10 years with California wildfire and our fire seasons, which turned to fire years. We don't really have seasons anymore in California. It's kind of always ready for fires. So they're getting better at it, but it's not something that they train every single day. And then even no matter how much you train, once it happens, like, oh, this it's very complex. The complexity of that fire was pretty high.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I was just coming back. I work up and down the coast quite a bit, and I was in Malibu yesterday, and I had a client who was living in a house that she just finished rebuilding from the 2018 fires.
Oh
And
yeah.
she's in the part of Malibu where the Woolsey fire was back then. And
Hmm.
every house on the street was either currently under construction or obviously brand new construction. So this does seem to be a thing that people are just kind of accepting living with. On that note, how close can a prescribed burn be to real estate? Is that something that's only done like out in the wilderness, or is that something that's done closer to urban areas?
Uh, Typically it's not done in urban areas because there's a lot of factors that go into planning a prescribed burn. Usually the main one is air quality, followed by who owns the land. Like whenever we would do in the Forest Service, you'd have to check the air quality for one. If it was too poor, they didn't want us to burn because we didn't want to make it worse. Or if there was like an inversion or something that's going to sock the smoke in, not let it rise, because they didn't want to make it worse for the public. And so obviously in LA, which gets socked in a lot for its topography, it'd be really challenging to do it there. And wind, like if there's no wind, it's gonna be stagnant. That's a main variable. But they also look into who owns the land, like I said. Cal Fire can't burn federal land, or they can't burn private land or municipal land. So then that would be a challenge, especially in these urban areas where sometimes you'd be surprised that the maps look like they're like a bunch of puzzle pieces. It'd be like, okay, this is LA City. This little chunk is randomly state land, and then like, or there's like random federal land in LA that you wouldn't expect, or private, and then private scattered everywhere. So that'd be a real challenge. That's how we would do it. There's basically a lot of our boundaries and close to houses, like you asked. It was mostly based off property lines, right? Like we can't burn someone's backyard. if they wanted, and then there's a whole lot of like liability and legal stuff that makes it a little more complicated. I don't know too much in that deep into the world because we have burned people's property before for like training, but I think that was a whole like they totally wanted us there. They asked for it. They went through all the channels. So it could happen, but it'd be pretty difficult.
That makes sense. So we're recording this on January 24th. It's been 14 days since the fires started, and neither Eaton or Palisades at this point are at 100% containment. And I think what's confusing for some people that aren't really educated on this, when you're not seeing smoke, because I haven't seen smoke from either of the fires in the air for, going on probably 10 days, what does containment mean? How do they get to 100% containment? How are they counting?
So yeah, this is always a confusing one to people, even when I first started, because there's controlled and contained, and those are two very different meanings. Contained has a little bit more like legality tied to it and a little more specific. So they'll call fires controlled. You usually won't hear that on the news or won't see it posted very much, but you'll see it if you look up. You can look up all the current fires and what their controlled contained status is and like how many people are on it and a bunch of other information. And so controlled, so like you'd probably call it like the Palisade fire would be controlled right now. There's no smoke. They probably have line cut around most of it, and a lot of it's secure. And maybe not in the deep middle or certain pockets they haven't got to, because they'll fly over these fires with IR cameras, infrared, look, looking for hot spots, see where there's still heat, and then send people out to do what's called mop up, which is just cool them down, either by putting water or mixing them around, letting put it out. And so, in order to call it contained, that's if you say it's contained, 100% contained would mean that the fire is 100% out. There is no chance that this fire is going to reignite. It's not going to get any bigger. Even if someone, like right now, you're getting winds, high winds again in Southern California. I don't know if it was recently. So they called it 100% contained, and then you had another wind event, and the fire blew out again and started burning. That's like a pretty big deal for the IC and the people who call it contained. Like they can get in a lot of trouble. So that's why typically you'll see, oh, there's no smoke. The fire looks out, but it's only 15, 20%. That's because it starts out, they're cutting line around the fire. So they're removing all the fuel from the edge of the burned and what we call the green, which is not burned. So they're making sure that's cold or cut in. And then you start working your way interior, kind of like you're closing in on the fire, finding every smoke, putting it out, hot spots, doing the IR flights, and they kind of work their way around the fire from where it starts to where it ends. The heel would be where it's starting, and the head of the fire would be if it was still burning, and that's where it ended. So then it slowly chunks away. Like when I was actively going to wildland fires a lot, and you'd look at the reports and see what's currently burning. In my mind, if I saw a fire and it was 15% contained, that, from my point of view, meant it was pretty much out and we probably weren't going to go to it. So usually they'll stay 0% contained for quite a while as they're doing the initial attack and figuring it out. But typically, especially in today's climate, when like prescribed burns get lost or get out, and it becomes a pretty big deal in the news, and people do like get fired or get big fines. They're Most people are pretty slow to call it contained because they want to be sure that it's out.
Of course.
And I think a lot of people don't know that, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's been a week and it's only 2% contained. What are they doing?" But it's just kind of the slow, monotonous process of firefighting is getting that containment. Because if you say put your name on it and say, "Hey, this is 100% contained," you have to be like 110% sure that it's not going to cross your line that you've called contained.
Amazing. Thank you for that clarification. When you're on one of these fires, what is the shift like? What's your experience been?
Mm, so that it varies per agency. Like typically CAL FIRE and well, it depends if it's a state-run fire, a Fed-run fire, or a combination where they're both running the fire. And typically, if you're a state resource or municipal resource, they'll do 24-hour shifts. So you'll come on the line. There's usually a briefing at around 7 a.m. And that's where they give you the plan for the day and give everyone their assignments and give you a safety message, or like a weather briefing and kind of overview of what happened the day before and what they want to happen today. And then you eat breakfast, get all your supplies, and go out to your assignment and work on your assignment. And then you're there for 24 hours. And typically that next day, there's the next day's shift will come to the fire line, relieve you. Then you get to go back and either go to wherever you're sleeping or go get food. And then you're off that next day. So it's 24 on, 24 off with some leeway. Like if you're close to the end of your one day and then there's something critical happening on the fire, you might stay on a little longer. Or if it's really critical, you'll stay on a lot longer. So it kind of ebbs and flows on that. Typically, federal resources work every single day, 16-hour shifts. So it's kind of similar. You usually get up around 5, 6, same exact scenario. Once you wake up, briefing, food, go out to the line, do your assignment work. And then they'll typically do a day shift and a night shift because they want whatever they're working on staff 24/7. And it's just flip flopped 16-hour shifts and a little bit of overlap. And then you'll get relieved by the night shifts, go home, or if you're night shifts, you're doing the same thing but at night. And then it's same as CAL FIRE in the state. If something critical is happening, you'll stay on longer. Or if there's something critical is going to happen, you typically not, but you might get off early so they can work you longer. 'Cause I'm not sure with CAL FIRE, but with the Forest Service, they try to maintain a 2-to-1 work rest. So every 2 hours you work, you're supposed to have an hour rest. That's why it's the 16th, and you get 8 hours off, and makes it 24 hours. But I've been on like one of my first major fires was like the Santa Rosa Napa complexes back in 2017, and it was a similar situation. Big wooey fire like LA, high winds, dry, and we ended up. I think we were on just a little bit over like 72-hour shift just because it was nonstop and it was like I said, now it's chaos in the beginning of a fire. So I'm sure on these LA fires in the Palisades, I'm sure there was people working multiple days. So then you're also trying to mitigate exhaustion, tired, and fatigue, and all these people trying to make really complex, quick decisions with a lack of sleep. And there's studies out there, if you awake more than 24 hours, you have the same mental capacity as someone with like a point oh 0.08 outside you're legally drunk.
I've heard that. Yeah, that sounds incredibly dangerous in a position where it's already dangerous as is.
Yeah, and that's like a piece. I don't know if there's not really a lot we can do to mitigate that, but like I said, there's these fires have so many pieces to them and they're so complex. Even the quote easier fires, you have people, and then also it was December. All these people already had a full fire season of doing this day in, day out since June, maybe May, depending on where they were. So you have a whole year of fatigue. Um, SoCal, they're kind of used to having year-round fire seasons, so they'll they'll have winter seasonals. This is a little off topic, but they'll you're kind of fully staffed down there because they're kind of used to it. It's like I said, the desert, and you have these high winds, like even as far back as like Esperanza fire. Same thing, Santa Ana winds kicked off. Usually it's a little earlier in the year, but it's kind of like the October, November, December Santa Ana months. So just I don't really know where I was going with that, but it's just really like lots of pieces in the puzzle of this.
Sure. Is there anything that you would want the public to understand about these fires that you feel like is not common knowledge?
I think I've touched on a little bit throughout this, but it's a lot of chaos and a lot of pieces of the puzzle. Like on a typical fire, you'll have a Cal Fire agency, you'll have Forest Service, you'll have a bunch of not private, a bunch of municipal city departments, county, and then you'll have OES, which is like the state emergency resources. They'll be like the yellow fire engines you'll see sometimes. And those are typically made up from those are usually different city, county departments, and they mix together. So you have all these different, and then there's also there's private contractors that will be on the fires too. So you have six, seven, eight, nine, 10, tons of different agencies working together, which it's already hard enough when we just try to get Cal Fire and the Forest Service to work together smoothly because they're just so different. I think everyone wants to nitpick and find the answer, what they could do better, what they could do wrong. But I would say 99.9% of the times, the people that are working these fires are doing what they think is the most important task in that moment. And hindsight's always 2020. Like you might be able to nitpick anything you wanted. They could have done this better, they could have done that different, they should have done this, or they should have done this. But in the moment where you're trying to initiate a plan and put it in action, you have such a short time window, you're dealing with so many things. You have to get approval sometimes for different agencies that everyone's trying their best. No one wants to see stuff burn, for in a non-beneficial way. I don't think people I don't think people should listen to like random billionaires that know how to
Agreed.
solve fire across
Yeah.
places. Like
Yeah, it
there's
was tough to not get offended. Especially my family's not even here, right? They're in Ohio and they don't know a lot about the climate here and that fires are actually just a normal part of living here. Granted, there was nothing particularly normal about a disaster of this magnitude, but yeah, it is something that there's procedures in place, right? Like you said, there's all these agencies with different priorities and they come together when they have to. And, it gets a little exhausting when you watch so much loss happen around you. Like me and everyone I know knows people that lost everything in this. I had to stop counting how many people because I've worked in the Palisades for so many years. I have an abundance of clients there that, you know, are now displaced. But hearing people talk about it and hearing people complain about arson and all these things, and yeah, that's been some of it. I think with a lot of the city fires that we've gotten, the ones that were more, obviously they're still investigating what started all of these, but it wasn't 100% arson, I don't think.
Yeah, and everyone wants to point arson like it could have been accidental arson. Like obviously, you didn't have a lightning storm come through. But at the same time, with such high winds, and this is like a whole another can of worms, but they, like there's some fires that happened in the past that were unhoused people, trying to stay warm. And most of the time they don't know any better. They don't know that there's going to be 60, 80-mile-an-hour winds and their warming fire could turn into a disaster. Or someone's car throws a spark on accident, or they all kinds of silly with how dry it gets, especially in just California in general, and with the winds on it. It doesn't take much. It could be very innocent accidents, and everyone wants to say, "Oh, it's arson. This person's a killer," but there's a lot. There's a lot to it.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Is there any way that I can point people to support your work?
One big thing that people hear about is, or maybe not hear about, is the Forest Service is fighting really hard to increase the pay of their firefighters. It's been a hot issue ever since I started. It still is. It changes every year. They're very overworked, very underpaid compared to their counterparts in fire. They're losing a lot of really good people just because they want a higher paying job, but they're expected to work these crazy fires, crazy schedules. So I would say if you could do anything, give a call to your local senator. There's a thing called the Tim Hart Act that's been trying to push through Congress for a while now, and it's about Tim Hart. He was a Forest Service firefighter. He passed away, and his wife has been pushing hard to increase the pay, increase maybe some benefits. Because when I first started, I made $14 an hour as firefighter two, which is like, or firefighter one, which is like your second step promotion on a firefighter. And then you're expected to do all these really complex fires, work year round, basically busy from nonstop work from May to November. And it's hard work, and I love the program. It was best like 10 years of my life. And I hate seeing how it's slowly just falling apart because they just can't keep people. And that's just a whole other topic, but I would just love to see those guys get what they deserve. Same with CAL FIRE, same with everybody. I'd say just support your local firefighters, let them do their work, don't get in their way. They're trying to do what they think is best. Don't listen to random billionaires.
Amazing advice on literally anything.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
It is. I'll find, because I think you had the article on your Instagram about the Tim Hart, the push for new legislation for that. So I'll go ahead and link that
Oh,
in the
I
show notes.
actually totally forgot about that. I
Mhm.
do have the link on my
Yeah.
Instagram profile.
Awesome. I'll share that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Eric.
Of course.
I was able to attend a volunteer event at SoFi Stadium. There were a lot of really great organizations that were there that were handing out supplies and support and answering questions. There were some representatives from FEMA there, and I did get to speak to them just to answer a couple quick commonly asked questions for FEMA. So here they are. What are your names?
I'm Brian.
I'm Tony.
Thank you, Brian and Tony. Can you tell me what's been like a frequently asked question that fire victims are encountering with FEMA?
Frequently asked question is, do I get the $770 from Joe Biden? The money does not come from Joe Biden. The money is allocated by Congress for a presidentially declared disaster. You have to get registered with FEMA to see if you qualify for it. It's called essential needs. Essential needs mean immediate needs, food, water, clothing, things of that nature. But you have to get registered first to see if you qualify.
Okay, great. And then how does that money get paid out? Is it instantly available?
You can choose two options. You can choose direct deposit or you can choose a paper check, whichever one is best for you.
Okay, great. And then could you dispel this rumor for me? People that are setting up GoFundMes, if they have verbiage about like rebuilding, does that disqualify them for some support?
It does.
Okay.
Because in one of the disqualifying questions in the application, it says, have you received assistance from any other outside organization? So if you're receiving money from a GoFundMe, it's going to conflict with what FEMA does.
What's like another question that you're finding people have?
Well, one of them is in that same venue. If I get money from insurance, will I still get money from FEMA? As long as they're not overlapping. You know what I mean? So FEMA's not going to pay you the same for the same items that your insurance pays you. It'll be like a double dip kind of thing. So if you say to replace your house is $100, just to make it simple, and after your deductible and insurance, you still have $75 left. FEMA can help you with that 75, possibly if you qualify, but they're not going to help you with the whole 100 because part of it is already paid. You understand is that clear?
That's definitely clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much for your time.
All right.
I also wanted to introduce you to Victoria. She is a senior program manager at Better Neighbors Project, which works with Michelson Found Animals to help anyone affected that has pets, cats, dogs, birds, lizards, whoever, Animals are part of our family, and so it's been really important to have a leg of the support for these fires for people who have pets, to both reunite them, to help them get things together that they need again, food, medical care, resources, even something as simple as being able to replace a leash or a collar for your dog when you've lost everything makes all the difference. Any amount of stress that we can take off the plate of someone who has lost everything is worth it. So here's my talk with Victoria, just answering a couple questions about what people can do to help and what the resources are that Better Neighbor Project is bringing to the table. And Michelson Found Animals created an animal welfare guide with a long and still moving list of resources for those affected by the fires, as well as those looking to help. So this guide includes pet inclusive resources for anyone whose housing has been jeopardized. Tell me your name and what organization you're with.
I'm Victoria PR. I'm the Better Neighbor Project Senior Program Manager at Michelson Found Animals Foundation.
Amazing. And can you tell me about what's going on at this event today?
Yeah, today we've partnered with some amazing organizations to bring services to the people who have been impacted by the fires. We are partnering with Greater Good Charities, who is a great organization that we've worked with now for years, but never in this capacity. So it's very wonderful to see them in action and be able to work alongside them. We've come together to give out thousands of pounds of pet food, pet supplies, like leashes and collars, just toys, things to make pets comfortable during this time. And there's a lot more resources that are here, but we want to make sure that the pets are also included, because we believe that they are part of the family. And at this time, I think a lot of people really rely on their pets to bring them comfort and security and just a sense of at least peace. I know my dog does that for me, and they're just such special beings, and to be able to also provide them with support, and the pet owners that love their pets so much, it's important work, and we're just so proud and honored to be here.
That's incredible. If anybody wants to support your organization, if they're not local to LA, what can they do to help?
Yeah, so if anyone is looking to help support, there are a lot of resources on our page that are connecting people to the organizations that are on the ground as well. So for example, there's some rescues whose facilities have completely been destroyed in the fire, so we want to support them. So we'll be highlighting certain groups and featuring some partners, and so that way they get the word out, and then that support can go to them. So one way that people can help is if they are wanting to provide direct support to pet owners and their furry family members, we will match any donation for a clinic or some sort of direct support. And so we just need an organization to say that they'll match the funds, and then we can put on a great event where we can have pet owners bring their little furry friends, and then have vaccines and microchipping and food treatment, and that way we can keep this going. And because this is going to be we're here for the long haul. This isn't just going to be a one-day thing, a couple weeks thing. There's a lot. It's a long recovery road, and so we're here for good, and we want to be able to be a source of information and support for everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug in the show notes where everybody can go ahead and donate stuff and send money and send whatever help they can. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, thank you for chatting.
I hope this episode answered a lot of questions. I just wanted to end with a reminder to please be gentle on the people of LA. We are still going through this. It's going to take a very long time to rebuild, and everybody deserves a little bit of empathy, no matter what your takes on these fires are. Thank you again for tuning into the show. Thanks for listening. Bye.